a few years ago. And we're all fine, we're all safe, and we, especially in terms of like the number of people who even to this day in our community are still homeless. We were incredibly lucky in terms of the way that it turned out. But I can compare the way that it impacted my wife and I, and to the way that it impacted our daughter, who was home with us because of COVID and the community college that she was attending. I was not in session because of COVID, and so she was home with us, and that was the home that she grew up in. Now, for my wife and I, we had been through a whole bunch of things and a whole bunch of moves and dealing with different medical issues of different kinds over the course of the years. And by the time we got to when our house burned down, having been together for over 20 years at that point, we kind of figured, oh geez, this sucks, but we did this and we went through the process and the thing. And it's kind of like, okay, a whole bunch of shit has happened to us over the years, and it's like, okay, well, we've almost in a way kind of been like training for this. Okay,
Right.
I don't want to say that anybody can ever be prepared, and it strikes everybody differently, and it was a horrible thing that I would have like wished to have happened to us, and it was a terrible thing that impacted like thousands of people in our community, but we were at a place where, at least psychologically, we could deal with it. Our daughter, like, she lost her childhood home. She lost all the things that were in her home, and it was much more difficult for her to deal with that. And,
Right.
And I think it's interesting what you say that referring back to the recurring dreams that I have about turning in schoolwork of various kinds, that as children we have no control, because I think a lot of what you illustrate in your book is that we increasingly, regardless of age, have no control, and that we are being infantilized by a system which demands more and more control over our lives and gives us less and less in return.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to say something dramatic, which is that the scope of life there are people who are attempting to shrink it.
Yeah.
So that all we think about is work. And life is an incredibly unknowable, unpredictable journey. I think we sometimes forget that, like, there is no set path for it. We always hear, like, do this, do this, do this, and we think that is what it means to be alive.
Yeah.
But it's not how it works. That is contrived. That is a narrative that is sold.
That's a very difficult thing to understand as a young person, by the way.
It is.
That everything is, all these possibilities are completely open to you, and that there's not a set path. I don't think I learned that for decades into my adulthood. Really.
Well, because it's scary, right? It's unknowable.
It is.
It's hard to hold just how complex being alive is, and how much we are taken advantage of in our ignorance by people with more money and more power. And you get to a certain point in life where you realize what's been going on, and you also realize at the same time, well, there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yeah.
That feels bad. My sister and I joke all the time that we are just two little peasants growing our potato gardens, trying to let, like, the Crusades go through.
Oh, there's some lovely filth over here.
It's like, okay, well, enjoy your geopolitical movements. I really need to eat this winter.
Yeah.
So please leave my potatoes alone.
Yeah. And it ultimately comes down to those potatoes. I mean, isn't that really like, we like in so many ways to think that the world of politics and the world of power is something not just beyond us, but outside of us.
Right.
And really it's about, like, are you going to let me live?
And, literally.
or not. And what am I going to do to stop you from imposing upon that? And how far am I willing to go? And how far are you willing to go?
Right. And it's interesting because a lot of times policies that are created or norms that are set up, they're not necessarily done maliciously. They're
Yeah.
just done out of ignorance for the bottom 50% because
Yeah.
it's a lifestyle that like the people who are in control of things just cannot comprehend.
Yeah.
They often come from almost dynastic sort of middle class or upper class wealth where it goes back generations, and so their conception of what it's like, I like growing up, I
Right.
had friends who were homeless, you know what I
Right.
mean? And I remember saying that in an offhand way, how I lost touch with one of my friends who, was last I heard living in a tent down in Texas. And we've lost track of him. We don't know where he is, but my friends and I like are still looking.
Yeah.
And I remember bringing this up with my friend who is from the same area as me, but we were surrounded by a bunch of sort of like my New York peers,
Yeah. Right.
and it was so unfathomable to them. And to me, it was just like, yeah, that's the tragedy of being alive is like you make one mistake. And then if you can't keep up with the system is not kind. It lets you go and you
Yeah.
become invisible.
Yeah.
Like if you just think about all the people we ignore on the daily who are homeless, who we just don't even we pretend like we don't hear them, you
Yeah.
know?
We don't see them asking
It's so
for food on the side of the road.
yes, because we don't have any food to give them, so we
Yeah.
feel bad. It's like that is I am convinced that it is a system created that way by design to keep us in fear and to keep us working. Maybe that's a little conspiracy theory of me. Maybe that's a little conspiracy
Well,
theory.
I think some people are thinking about it more than others, and I think that the people, some people are able to see what's going on while being, at the top of the order, and some people are just maybe benefiting from it, who are just like don't have any pressing need to see. I mean,
That's
if
true.
if
Yeah.
things are going okay for you, if you've got everything that you need and your life is going all right, why do you need to look beyond that? I mean,
And you're insulated. Maybe like empathy isn't a natural skill for you, or
right.
you have other talents.
Yeah.
It's just such a
It's
complex.
a
It's
very
so
kind way of putting it, by the way.
complex.
If empathy isn't your natural skill, if you have other talents other than being a being a human being,
Well, I
but
don't know.
it's true though.
We all
It's true. Like people have different areas. Like what you're saying is literally true. I guess I just like to think that everybody is engaged empathically, and it's not true, and it's never really been true, and certainly I think that our ability to learn empathy has been significantly hampered by the system that we have right now. I mean, engaging
well,
people through social media,
yes.
it's so it shields you from that. It
Yes,
protects you
it
from
does.
gaining experiences that tend you towards empathy.
We sound like old men who are like, "Get off our lawn!" Right?
In a way, but I mean, God, the way I describe it, it's more than just like the technology, but there are a lot of systems that protect
There
us
are a lot
from.
of barriers to connection. We
Yeah,
are
there are a lot of
very
silos.
isolated.
Yeah.
You know what I'll say? I don't want to spoil my silly little book, but
Uh,
what I'll say is that I really think, now I don't want to sound too woo-woo here,
uh-huh.
but I really think everything is a little bit connected.
Yeah.
And so when you have sort of, this is, you know what I'll do is I'll tell a story from my personal life.
Okay.
When I was growing up in Nashville 2010, there was a really bad flood.
Yeah.
And do you remember this?
No, I don't.
It was really gnarly and it wiped out a good portion of Nashville. Now,
Wow.
what
Okay.
happened is a bunch of people became homeless and they lost their jobs during that time.
Yeah.
At the same time, property developers came in and they completely bought out all of the areas that were affected by the flood.
Mm.
Now, that's just a sense of, bad luck. That's just natural disaster. It's happened to you. I remember my dad's property flooded like hell, and it was very scary. But you can see the way all of Nashville today has changed to center in that one moment when the property developers came in and
Yeah.
took advantage of everybody at their lowest because insurance agencies were just a little too slow and a little too cautious. And people had to get money to live.
Yeah.
And so they sold out whole neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Now, when I say everything is connected, I mean that we can look at the patterns of growth in Nashville and the way it has been hemorrhaging locals and replacing them with sort of, new folks who
Yeah.
can maybe afford something a little more than the people who originally lived there could.
Yeah.
Now,
It's interesting that you say that, because I happen to be talking to a former client of mine who is very wealthy, and they just told me that they moved to the Nashville area.
yes, it's insidious. Every time I go to a party, somebody's like, I'm buying property in Nashville. I'm like, I wish you wouldn't, but
Yeah.
congrats, I guess.
Well, on the plus side, you
Like,
get fun people like Ben Shapiro moving to your neighborhood.
right. Yeah, exactly. And then they say things to you like the school systems are better. And you're like, I'm sorry, Tennessee is in the bottom 10 of state
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But, so it's when I say it's all connected, I mean that when natural disasters happen, right, and people are put out,
Mm-hmm.
they lose their work, they lose their home, and
Yeah.
then the system comes in and takes advantage of that and profits off of that.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's just wrong. I
Yeah.
think it's wrong that when somebody's laid low, that's when it's a good bargain for other people. I think it's really sad that you can go and look at all the houses that are being foreclosed on and put in a bottom bid on somebody's like darkest moment. To
Yeah.
me, that just feels so just sad that our society is built like that, and
Yeah.
that it's built like that by design to sort of reward the people who have the means to take advantage of other people when they're at their lowest. It just seems really undignified.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking with Tom Sexton about this a couple of weeks ago. The systems that are designed, or at least purportedly in place, in order to help people when they are at their lowest, at their most
Right.
vulnerable, things like FEMA are woefully deficient, and yet the systems in place that allow folks to be taken advantage of, those are free and clear. And I seem to recall that Naomi Klein had a few things to say about that in her book Disaster Capitalism.
Yeah, it's just the wild, wild west out here.
Yeah.
It's really like if you're on the bottom, guess what? The law doesn't care. It doesn't. You are playing by a different set of rules,
Right,
than the people at the top. And it's just very depressingly apparent to me. And so I'm sort of, I don't have any answers. And I know that I probably sound like very fresh-faced, but sort of trying to grapple with all those things is the onus, with which this book sort of emerged.
I mean, I think in a way you do have some solution, at least as far as I've read thus far, in that there are still dreams, and then that we do have that, and so far, even though those also are being pressed, we do have ownership of that, and we have ways still at our command to imagine, and therefore the possibility to reshape the future and the way that we organize our lives and ourselves.
I've been quoting Mr. David Graeber a lot on my little press circuit for this book. I love him. And there's a quote of his that is basically like the biggest secret in the world. And now I'm paraphrasing. I'm not as loquacious as him. But the biggest secret in the world is that we make everything that surrounds us.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really true. Every single element of society has been made by someone and is something